See, gastroesophageal reflux disease is a disease in which the gastric contents, predominantly acid, refluxes back into the esophagus and causes either the burns, or even without the causing the burns, will cause symptoms like heartburn. It is a pretty common disease. If you look across the world, it's much more common in the Western population. But in the last decade or two, the incidence of this disease is increasing in our country as well. And sitting in a gastroenterology outpatient, this becomes one of the most common disorders that we see in day-to-day practice. And not only that, the number of people in the population who are suffering from this is significantly more than what is actually presenting to the doctor. A lot of these people keep on taking the over-the-counter medicines or home remedies to take care of their occasional symptoms, and they land up with the doctor only when the symptoms increase or they develop complications. So it's compared to an iceberg where the majority of the things are below the surface and there are few who manifest and reach the doctor. Before we go on to the understanding the treatment, the management, the investigations, we need to look at what is the basic fault. The lower esophageal sphincter, which is at the junction of the esophagus and stomach, in a basal state is in a high pressure zone. So it prevents the reflux of the gastric contents back into the esophagus. It does open up when we swallow the food, and with the peristalsis, esophageal peristalsis, the valve also opens up and lets the things go down. So if there is an abnormal relaxation of this sphincter, that leads on to the reflux of the event. And this can be compounded by the disturbance in the movements of the stomach in the form of delayed gastric emptying, which can further increase the symptoms. There is a lot of confusion between the gastroesophageal reflux disease and hiatus hernia. It's important to know that hiatus hernia may or may not be there, but the patient may have reflux esophagitis. Not only that, patients with hiatus hernia may have no symptoms at all. But yes, if there is a big hiatus hernia, usually it is relevant to the patient's condition. This particular disease can have varied manifestations. The typical symptoms that we call will be in the form of heartburn, where the patient has a burning sensation in the retrosternal area, and if the reflux rate goes higher up, they will get a feeling of regurgitation of the gastric contents into the throat, and these typical symptoms may or may not be associated with the typical esophagitis about which we will talk about later on. And the atypical symptoms could be many, which so-called supraesophageal symptoms. They like chest pain, cough, they may precipitate bronchial asthma, more so in the pediatric age group, and so on. There is a small group of patients who will develop complications in the form of esophageal ulcer or a stricture when they present with dysphagia. And even a smaller number, actually the relationship is also very uncertain whether it is a complication of esophagitis or it occurs on its own, and that is the very famous disease called Barrett's esophagus. As I already mentioned, the complications of gastroesophageal reflux disease can be, they are not very common, but still they are significant, and that is the ulcer, and less than 2% can bleed, and about 4 to 20% is called stricture, so-called peptic stricture, which has to be managed with the dilatation along with the medicine, standard medicines. And the pulmonary or ENT manifestations, which we already talked about in the form of asthma, pulmonary fibrosis, pneumonia, bronchitis, sleep apnea, etc. Or they can have a dysphonia, cough, hoarseness, laryngitis, sinusitis, or pharyngitis, etc. Now, when you look at these patients, all of them, those who have symptoms, may or may not have endoscopic evidence of esophagitis, and that number is quite big, and that's almost 40%. And that is an entity what we call as non-erosive reflux disease, and the small word used is NERD, and that's endo-negative gastroesophageal reflux disease. They say more than 40% can have that, and so that's the purpose of saying this, is that because you have a normal endoscopy, that does not mean the patient does not have reflux, and these patients are best assessed by a therapeutic challenge to a proton pump inhibitor. There have been some changes which have been demonstrated on electron microscopy in the mucosa of these patients, but I think it's not part of a day-to-day clinical practice, and still things which is evolving for the future. Now, once the patient comes to us with the typical symptoms of a heartburn, regurgitation, the question is, how far do you investigate, or you straightway start the treatment? I think that's the major issue that we need to discuss. And though there is a long list of investigations, I'll go through that, and then we'll talk about whom to investigate and whom not to investigate. So the investigations like barium swallow don't have much role into day-to-day clinical practice, except for the patients whom we have dysphagia and where we are suspecting a stricture. As seen in this bariogram, you can see the peptic stricture at the lower end of the esophagus. Now, the other investigations, as I said, the key investigation is whether you do endoscopy or not. And before we go and talk about endoscopy, we should look at this so-called PPI test, that is the proton pump inhibitor test to detect gastroesophageal reflux disease. It's like a therapeutic trial, and there is a huge number of studies which have been done on that. And the classical one what you use is omeprazole 40 milligram twice a day for about a week or so, and if its patient shows response to the symptoms, then you continue to treat as a gastroesophageal reflux disease. So there has been, as I said, there's a number of studies available, which is whether it's a erosive or a non-erosive reflux disease. This is an useful test, and it is used almost all over for the day-to-day clinical practice. So the question is, whom do you do the endoscopy? Well, endoscopy is reserved for the selected patients. And how do you select those patients? The patients who have suspicions, and that is called patient has got anemia, history of GI bleed, patient has a swelling difficulty like the form of dysphagia, patient has systemic symptoms, that is losing appetite, losing weight, or there are fresh symptoms in the elderly, or patient is not responding to the regular proton pump inhibitors, and or you are screening for a Barrett's esophagus, which is not relevant to in our country. So these are the things that we are called as red flags, and that's what we need to look at in when you're busy clinical practice. If you find these things are there, then please do not withhold the endoscopy from these patients. All these patients must undergo endoscopy, and when you do endoscopy, the key things to see is to first confirm whether the patient has erosions or no erosions, or patient has complications like Barrett's or a stricture, or the patient has some other disease which could be some sort of a other esophagitis like Candida, or there could be a pill esophagitis, or there could be other reasons for that. And when you look at the type of esophagitis, then it is labeled, different classifications are there. The commonly which we like to follow is called the LA classification of erosions, that is A, B, C, and has been shown here that is the A, B, C according to that. There are other investigations available, that is 24-hour pH monitoring, which is shown in this particular graph in a normal as well as in the gastroesophageal reflux disease, which actually shows you the reflux events and measures the pH and for how much and over time, and can put you that is abnormal. But it is reserved for a few patients in which patients being taken for surgery or patients are not responding, and that's the reason the time when we like to do. Esophageal manometry again has a very limited role, even much less than the pH monitoring in the management of this disease, and as a matter of routine it is done only in those patients which need to undergo surgery for the treatment. Now once we have evaluated, the question is how do you treat them? The treatment has to be looked at, one, in the initial medical treatment, and two, what is the long term history and accordingly what do you treat in the long term, and three, then do you do any more indications of treatment other than the medical treatment. The cornerstone to the treatment is combination of two things. It is not only medicines. I think the cornerstone is the lifestyle modifications if you want to cut down the relapses, and lifestyle modifications we'll talk about later, and the drug therapy, again the different types of medicines which are available, we'll briefly talk about that. And what is the role of surgery or any endoscopic measures, which is the latest talk in the community, we'll talk about that. I think there are a number of lifestyle modifications which most of us know, that is if we understand why the reflux occurs, then we advise them to elevate the head end while sleeping. Mind it, it is not with a pillow, it is a sloping bed, and avoid large fatty meal. Basically you say the advice to the patient is have small frequent meals. And thirdly, to put a gap of 2 to 3 hours between meals and going to bed. Of course, patients should be advised to stop the things which further relax the lower esophageal sphincter, and the key thing here is the smoking. Those who are smoking, they must stop, otherwise they will not respond well and they will relapse more and more. And they should also be advised to lose weight if they are overweight, and they should also avoid excess of tea, coffee, carbonated drinks, chocolates, etc., because all these things will further relax the lower esophageal sphincter. First, I am talking about the medical treatment, which is a less common used drug, that is the prokinetics. They are not the cornerstone of treatment. They are used as a additional drugs in a 30 to 40% of patients who have associated gastric atony. The combination of a PPI and a prokinetic is not the recommended thing, and there are no clear trials to show that the combination is better than a single drug. So it is used in the patients who have associated delayed gastric emptying, which is assessed by the patient's complaint of a post meal satiety fullness which prolonged for a longer time. H2 receptor antagonists, which we used to use earlier, are not used. They don't have any role other than an additional medicines with the proton pump inhibitors. The key treatment is a proton pump inhibitor, and if you look at the PPIs across the board, omeprazole, lansoprazole, rabeprazole, pantoprazole or esomeprazole, almost all of them have the healing range of 90% or above. There could be a difference in the different PPIs, about 4 to 5% this way or that way, or 2, there is some nocturnal acid breakthrough, or 3, the issue of a drug interactions, but across the board most of them are the same, and the drug of choice for any gastroesophageal reflux disease today is a proton pump inhibitor. Now once we give this treatment, we normally advise to take it for about 12 weeks. Now what happens after that? If you look at the various patients, about 40% will have an isolated episode, but large number of them may have a recurrent progressive disease or a recurrent non-progressive disease, which will count around 60 to 70%. Now, these are the patients who will require some sort of other maintenance treatment. And as it is a chronic relapsing condition, so it relapses quickly after the cessation of the treatment, and so they will require a maintenance treatment. And if you look at the maintenance treatment, again, the drug of choice is a proton pump inhibitor. There has been a lot of work on whether you should cut down the dose, whether you should go with daily dose, or whether you should give a weekend dose or alternative dose. Well, there is no clear answer to in an individual patient. One has to take a call on an individual patient, but of course we do use the as less the dose as feasible. The second thing to remember is that they are safe drugs. Recently there has been a spate of articles on the long-term side effects of the proton pump inhibitors in the form of, say, B12 deficiency, osteoporosis, or some Clostridium difficile infections. But these are much hyped events, and they do not take away the benefits of the PPIs when we look at them. And so PPIs do remain the drug of choice. They are the safe drugs. They have been given 15 to 20 years without any major side effects. But yes, as the treatment duration and the dose prolongs, you keep a check for their calcium metabolism and the vitamin D levels and all that. So daily PPI provides best long-term maintenance treatment. So at the end of this, when we look at what is the algorithm, when the patient comes to us with a heartburn, endoscopy may be normal or may show erosions, patient is given PPIs, and then you observe over 2 to 3 relapses, and if they are relapsing, then you put them on a long-term maintenance treatment. Or the other option will be that if the relapses are not very often, then you can use intermittent treatment. Now, once we have finished this with the medical treatment, there are skeptics and there will be arguments against long-term medical treatment, and that is based on the safety issues of long-term PPI, which we have already talked about. And second issue, the difficulty of taking long-term medicines, which is just a habit of taking medicines, or even the cost of medicines, which may be more relevant in the West than in our country, because PPI is much cheaper drug. Because of these two arguments, people have talked about surgery. The surgeon which was put on the cupboard for the treatment of gastroesophageal reflux disease, people were not asking. But with the onset of laparoscopic surgery, the surgery gained prominence about 10 years back, and that is so-called fundoplication. Now, it became very popular, and but when the long-term data appeared, that is following about 10 years after surgery, they were eye-opening. That is, most of these patients will require drugs even after fundoplication. And there are significant complications of surgery, including rarely having death. And thirdly, which is a very relevant factor, the results of surgery are operator dependent. Because if you look at this, the regular use of anti-reflux medication in the medical arm, of course, all of them are 80 to 90% will be taking, but even in the surgical arm, there are almost 60 to 70% patients who will be consuming the regular anti-reflux medication. And if you look at the morbidity, see the difference between the centers of excellence, like centers of excellence, they do have still significant morbidity, but when you go outside the centers of excellence, all these complications are increasing, and the patients keep on suffering lifelong with the dysphagia, gola formation in a significant number of patients. So generally now, the surgery is reserved for a very small number of patients who have a supraesophageal symptoms like aspirations, who do not want to take or are unable to take the medicines. The surgeon, you want to help your surgeon friend. And the next step, the issue I want to touch upon, there has been a huge interest in the endoscopic methods to treat reflux disease in the last 10 years. There has been a suturing, there has been an injection therapy, there has been a stratum, and now lately there has been a magnetic ring, is a good study published in New England Journal of Medicine last year, all giving rise to a lot of enthusiasm. But one must remember that in all these studies done with these technologies, there has been no control group in any of the study, and patients selected as such who otherwise may not require intervention. Very small, mild esophagitis and small hiatus hernia. We do not have any long-term data, and safety and user friendliness is still a dream. They have only shown us that this is feasible, but they have not shown us that these are effective and long-term alternatives to the surgery or the medical treatment. So my advice will be to be cautious, have patience, wait for better data, and wait for better technology. I'm sure that the future lies in the endoscopic therapy, but we don't have the right one right now. So I conclude by saying that gastroesophageal reflux disease is a common medical condition with a chronic relapsing course. Proton pump inhibitors offer the best initial treatment as well as the long-term maintenance treatment. For specific failures or specific clinical problems like nocturnal ASIC breakthrough, drug interactions, refractory GERD, your finer adjustments are required in the medication. Laparoscopic fundoplication is a good modality but has limitations and has to be selectively used. Endoscopic measures are still in infancy and we should not rush to use them. Thank you very much.